I, 32F, have been dealing with relentless harassment from my brother-in-law Jake, 38M, for the past 5 years. This troubling dynamic began shortly after I married his younger brother, Tom, 30M. Initially, Jake appeared to be amiable, but things quickly deteriorated. It all started with seemingly innocuous comments at family gatherings. Jake would make offhand remarks about my appearance or my job as a teacher. I attempted to brush these off as his attempted humor. However, the comments soon became more frequent and progressively more hurtful. For instance, during one Thanksgiving, Jake kept pressuring me about when Tom and I planned to have children. Despite my explanation that we weren't ready yet, Jake persisted, making insensitive comments like, "You're not getting any younger, and Tom needs someone to carry on the family name." His relentless questioning left me feeling humiliated and distressed, but I was reluctant to create a scene at dinner as time passed. Jake's behavior escalated. He started texting me regularly, initially sending benign memes or jokes. But soon, these messages turned intrusive and personal, probing into my relationship with Tom. I shared my discomfort with Tom, who suggested that Jake's behavior might be a result of his loneliness following his divorce. Tom advised me to ignore the messages, but they continued. Jake began making inappropriate comments on my social media posts and would show up unannounced at my workplace, claiming he was just in the neighborhood. The frequency and nature of these incidents made me dread family gatherings. Knowing Jake would be present, the situation reached a crisis point last Christmas. After a few drinks, Jake cornered me in the kitchen and began discussing how Tom didn't appreciate me. He suggested that if he had the chance, he would treat me better. Feeling scared and uncomfortable, I managed to escape and confided in Tom about what happened. Although Tom confronted Jake, Jake dismissed the incident as a joke and insisted I was overreacting, having reached my limit. I decided to take decisive action. I blocked Jake's phone number and all his social media accounts, and informed Tom that I no longer wanted to attend family events where Jake would be present. Tom was initially upset, accusing me of causing a rift within the family. However, after I showed him the evidence of Jake's harassment and explained the impact it was having on me, Tom reluctantly agreed to support my decision. Despite this, Jake began spreading false narratives about me within the family. He portrayed me as overly dramatic and problematic. Some of Tom's relatives reached out, urging me to forgive Jake and restore family harmony. Tom's parents in particular were upset, claiming I was driving a wedge between their sons. The pressure was overwhelming, and I found myself questioning whether I was overreacting or if my decision to cut off contact with Jake was justified. In an attempt to address the situation, I reconsidered my approach. I began to feel guilty for the severity of my actions, and wondered if Jake's behavior might improve if he had someone to focus on other than me. I decided to facilitate a potential romantic connection for Jake, hoping it would resolve the tension. I thought of my friend Sarah, who had recently ended a relationship, and believed she might be a good match for Jake. Nervous but hopeful, I reached out to Jake and suggested a meeting to discuss something important. To my surprise, Jake responded positively, and we arranged to meet at a local coffee shop. During our meeting, Jake seemed unusually polite and respectful. I proposed the idea of him going on a date with Sarah, explaining that she might be interested in meeting him. Jake was enthusiastic and thanked me for the opportunity. I left the coffee shop feeling optimistic that this might lead to a positive change. However, the night of Jake and Sarah's date proved disastrous. Sarah called me the next day, recounting that while Jake was charming at first, he soon began making inappropriate comments and attempting to get physically close to her. Sarah ended the date early and expressed her discomfort. I was devastated and apologized profusely to Sarah, who understandably decided she did not want to see Jake again. The situation took a further turn for the worse when I received a text from Jake, which read, "Thanks for introducing me to Sarah. She's cute, but not as cute as you. When are we going to have our own date?" I was horrified. It became clear that Jake had used the setup with Sarah as a ploy to get closer to me, rather than genuinely seeking a relationship. I shared the message with Tom, and he was furious. He finally saw Jake's behavior for what it was, manipulative and inappropriate. Tom confronted Jake again, demanding he cease all contact with me. Jake, in turn, started playing the victim, claiming that I had led him on and that Tom was overreacting. This only fueled further division within the family, with some members siding with Jake and dismissing our concerns, feeling guilty for involving Sarah and frustrated by the escalating family drama. Tom and I considered drastic measures. The idea of relocating to another city to distance ourselves from the toxic environment was becoming increasingly appealing. We were tired of the constant pressure and drama, and felt that moving away might be the only solution. Amidst this turmoil, we received another shocking development. Jake called Tom to inform him that he wanted us to vacate the house we had been renting from him. The house, which Jake had inherited from our grandparents and had been renting to us at a reduced rate, was now off limits due to the supposed mental distress our situation was causing him. We were given 30 days to find a new place to live. Was stunned and infuriated by Jake's ultimatum. He reached out to his parents, hoping they would mediate the situation. To our dismay, Tom's parents sided with Jake, suggesting that some distance might be beneficial for everyone. They blamed our actions for exacerbating Jake's difficult situation, further isolating us from the family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything Jake had done, his parents were taking his side? Tom had tried to reason with them, explaining the gravity of Jake's inappropriate actions, how he had harassed me for years, how he had made me uncomfortable at family events, and how his behavior had reached a new low during his disastrous date with Sarah. But it felt like talking to a brick wall. Despite our detailed accounts and the mounting evidence, Jake's parents continued to make excuses for him, insisting he was misunderstood and that we were overreacting. It became glaringly apparent that Jake had always been the family's golden child, and no matter how egregious his behavior, his parents would find a way to justify it. Their dismissal of our concerns was especially hurtful. They even suggested, without a shred of evidence, that I might have been leading Jake on or misinterpreting his attempts at friendliness. This was the breaking point for Tom. He erupted in anger, confronting his parents with a forceful argument. He accused them of enabling Jake's behavior and told them they were choosing Jake over their own grandchildren, our 2 kids, ages 3 and 5. This was a point of deep emotional turmoil for us, as the kids were now caught in the crossfire, confused and distressed by the upheaval. They didn't understand why we had to move or why they were seeing their grandparents less frequently. Tom's father's response was both dismissive and cruel. He told Tom to man up and stop complaining. If we couldn't appreciate Jake's generosity in renting us the house, perhaps it was best that we left. Now we were faced with the daunting task of finding a new home on short notice. The rental market in our area was highly competitive, and we were struggling to find something affordable that would accommodate our family. Tom was overwhelmed, grappling with stress and anger. He was constantly muttering about how his family had turned against us. The kids' confusion and distress only added to our heartache. I felt an immense amount of guilt, believing that if I had only kept quiet about Jake's harassment, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. But deep down, I knew that enduring harassment to keep the peace wasn't a viable or acceptable solution. Tom and I were now considering a more drastic step, cutting ties with his entire family. Tom felt he couldn't forgive them for siding with Jake, especially when their actions had direct consequences on our children. I was torn. Part of me agreed with him, but another part worried about the long-term effects of severing family ties. Meanwhile, our immediate concern was securing housing. Our sense of stability was crumbling, and the uncertainty was overwhelming. In the midst of this chaos, Tom and I decided we needed to approach the situation from a different angle. We reached out to Tom's grandfather, Grandpa Joe, who had originally owned the house we were renting. We hoped he might have some influence or insight that could help us navigate this family crisis. We invited Grandpa Joe over for coffee one afternoon. The visit started off casually, with us catching up on family news and sharing pictures of our kids. Eventually, I took a deep breath and began explaining everything that had transpired with Jake over the years. I detailed the inappropriate comments, the late-night messages, and how Jake's behavior at family gatherings had made me feel unsafe and uncomfortable. Tom supported my account, adding specific details and expressing his own frustrations about how his brother's actions had impacted our family. Initially, Grandpa Joe appeared skeptical. Jake had always been his favorite grandchild, and I could tell he was struggling to reconcile this image with the troubling behavior we described. However, as we continued to provide evidence, text messages from Jake and detailed accounts of incidents, Grandpa Joe's expression began to change. The turning point came when we recounted how Jake had forced us out of the house and how Tom's parents had sided with him. Grandpa Joe's face reddened with anger. He was visibly shaken, unable to believe that his own children could side with Jake over their other son and his family. After a long, intense silence, Grandpa Joe announced that he needed to have a serious talk with Jake and Tom's parents. He asked us to stay in the house for now, assuring us that we wouldn't be forced to move out immediately. We were relieved but cautious, hopeful that his intervention might bring about some change. A week later, Grandpa Joe called us with an update. He had confronted Jake about our complaints and presented him with the evidence. Initially, Jake had tried to deny everything, but faced with his grandfather's disappointment and the overwhelming evidence, he eventually admitted to his behavior. Grandpa Joe also addressed Tom's parents, making it clear that he disapproved of their handling of the situation. He reminded them that the house was intended for all of his grandchildren, not just Jake. The outcome of Grandpa Joe's intervention was more favorable than we had hoped. We were allowed to remain in the house, and Jake was instructed to leave us alone. Grandpa Joe made it clear that any further harassment from Jake would result in serious consequences, including potential legal action. Tom's parents reached out to apologize, acknowledging that they hadn't fully understood the extent of Jake's behavior and admitting they should have listened to us earlier. While this was a significant step forward, Tom and I knew that rebuilding trust would take time. We were grateful for Grandpa Joe's support, but the damage to our relationships with Tom's parents and Jake remained. For now, Jake has been instructed to communicate with us only through Tom or his parents, and he has been told to seek counseling to address his issues. The situation is far from perfect. There is still tension within the family, and I am unsure if I will ever feel entirely comfortable around Jake again. Nevertheless, for the first time in years, I feel that our concerns have been acknowledged and taken seriously. We are now focusing on healing as a family and providing a stable environment for our children. The journey has been arduous, but with the support of Grandpa Joe and a renewed sense of resolve, I finally feel that we are heading in the right direction.